It's supposed to feel good, right? You're alone, no distractions, nothing standing in your way. And for a few seconds everything builds: pressure, tension, release, and then silence, that quiet moment right after. It creeps in slowly, but it's there, that weird feeling in your chest, a fog behind your eyes, the sudden drop from stimulation to stillness. You just finished, and somehow, you feel worse, emptier, and you can't explain why. You tell yourself it's normal, that it doesn't matter, that it's private and harmless and everyone does it. But something about that moment keeps bothering you. You don't feel relaxed. You don't feel satisfied. You feel drained, and not just physically, mentally, emotionally, like something was taken, not given. Most people don't talk about this part. The part after the pleasure, that strange, quiet shame, that emptiness you pretend not to notice. But what if that feeling isn't just in your head? What if your body and your brain are trying to tell you something? Because here's the truth most people never hear. That post-masturbation emptiness isn't random. It's not weakness. It's not a flaw in your character or something broken inside you. It's chemistry. It's pattern. It's wiring. And more importantly, it's fixable. The feeling you're experiencing has roots deeper than most people ever realize. It's not just about the act itself. It's about what led you there, why you did it, what it was trying to replace, what it took from your nervous system, what it told your brain, what it whispered to your self-worth. And whether you realize it or not, that habit, the one that's supposed to be a release, might actually be draining your motivation, dulling your emotions, and disconnecting you from the life you actually want. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't about guilt. This isn't some lecture. And it's not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do with your body. That's your choice. But if you've ever found yourself lying there afterward, staring at the ceiling, wondering why you feel so hollow, you're not alone, and more importantly, you're not stuck. In this video, we're going to break down exactly why you feel empty after you masturbate. We'll go deep into the biology, the brain chemistry, the emotional wiring, and the quiet routines that build this pattern without you realizing it. And then we'll show you how to fix it, how to take back control of your dopamine, how to shift from numbness to clarity, how to rebuild energy, motivation, and emotional connection, even if you don't want to quit altogether. Because you don't need to quit to feel better. You just need to understand the cycle you're caught in. And once you see it, really see it, that heavy, confusing feeling, it won't control you anymore. So if you've ever asked yourself, why do I feel worse afterward? This is the video you've been looking for. Stay with me. Because what we uncover next might change the way you think about this forever. So let's start with something that might surprise you. The emptiness you feel after masturbation isn't just emotional, it's chemical. That's right, this strange, hollow feeling you sometimes can't explain. It's not weakness, it's not a moral issue. It's a reaction, a physical, biological, deeply wired response in your brain. And once you understand it, everything starts to make more sense. You see, when you build up to climax, your brain is riding a high, dopamine. Your brain's reward chemical is surging. It's the same neurotransmitter that spikes when you win something, when you chase something, or when you're excited about something that's about to happen. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's about anticipation, motivation, the feeling of progress. That's why the buildup feels so intense. You're not just feeling turned on. You're feeling alive, alert, engaged. It's energy, momentum, and chemical excitement flooding your brain. But the moment you finish, whether alone or not, something flips, that wave crashes, and almost instantly, your dopamine levels plummet. It's not a gentle decline, it's a hard drop, and in that crash, you suddenly feel flat. The excitement disappears, the clarity fades, you go from chasing something to having nothing left to chase, and your brain, now depleted of the very chemical that was making you feel good, enters a kind of emotional withdrawal. That's the emptiness. That's the drop. That's the chemical silence that settles in right after you release. And it's why, even if you felt excited, even if you were looking forward to it, even if it was good, you still feel worse when it's over. Because pleasure without connection often leads to a crash without closure. But dopamine isn't the only player here. During sexual release, your body also gets a rush of oxytocin and prolactin, chemicals designed to create connection, bonding, and believe it or not, sleepiness. In a natural setting, these chemicals help us bond with a partner, calm down and feel close to someone. But when you're alone, especially when you're watching content and not physically connected to anyone, Those chemicals don't have anywhere to go, there's no one to bond with, no emotional feedback. So instead of feeling connected, your brain feels confused. It tried to release bonding hormones without a bond, and what you're left with is a strange cocktail of lowered dopamine, misplaced oxytocin, and elevated prolactin, all of which, when out of sync, can leave you feeling emotionally flat or even mildly depressed. Some people describe this as feeling foggy. Others say they feel ashamed, unmotivated, or mentally off. And again, this isn't weakness, it's wiring. Your brain was designed to pair this release with intimacy, context, and connection. But when you remove those things, when it's just about the stimulation, your brain still goes through the same chemical sequence. The only difference, the emotional landing zone, doesn't exist, so you fall through it, straight into that emptiness. Here's something else to consider. The more frequently you chase that release, the more shallow each high becomes. That dopamine hit, it stops hitting the way it used to. The anticipation starts to fade. The excitement becomes less intense. But the crash, that stays. In fact, it sometimes gets worse. Why? Because the baseline of your brain chemistry starts shifting. The more you stimulate, the more your brain adapts. It starts dialing down its natural receptors. It becomes less sensitive to real pleasure. And that makes everything, especially normal life, feel dull. So you chase another hit, another release, another moment of escape, but it's never quite enough. You're not climbing anymore. You're treading water, and deep down, you know it. That's what creates the internal tension. You finish, and you feel worse, not because you did something bad, but because your brain at that moment is chemically empty. And here's where it gets even more interesting. This post-climax crash doesn't just affect your mood. It affects your focus, your energy, your decision-making. When your dopamine is drained, small tasks feel overwhelming. Your ability to delay gratification goes down. You feel tired but not rested. You want to do something, but nothing feels appealing. This is why, for many people, that quick release leads to hours of unproductive fog. They plan to just get it out of the way and move on. But what actually happens? They spiral. They scroll. They lose momentum. Not because they're lazy, but because their brain is running on empty. And if this becomes a daily pattern, or even multiple times a day, you don't just feel emotionally numb, you start to lose drive across the board. Real life becomes harder. Motivation fades. Focus disappears. And ironically, the very thing you turn to for release starts becoming the thing that holds you back. That short burst of pleasure now has a cost. Your energy, your clarity, your sense of momentum. So what do you do with this? You start by recognizing that the crash is real, that you're not imagining it, that you're not weak or broken or messed up. Your brain is following a pattern that was meant to be tied to something deeper, but you've trained it to chase the surface, and now it's confused, and tired, and hungry for something more than just stimulation. The good news? Once you see this clearly, you can start to take your power back. Not by quitting cold turkey, not by shaming yourself, but by understanding the cycle, noticing the pattern, watching how you feel, not during but after, and then making small changes, delaying that urge, choosing to move first, or breathe, or connect, giving your brain something meaningful before you give it something chemical. Because the crash, it doesn't have to define you. It's not the end of the story. It's just your body's way of telling you, hey, this isn't it. And once you hear that voice clearly, you'll stop chasing what drains you and start searching for what fills you. Ready to find out what that emptiness is really covering up? Let's go deeper, because what we uncover next might explain more than you ever realized. Here's the part almost no one talks about. What you're really craving when you reach for release isn't always physical. In fact, most of the time, it has very little to do with lust. The truth, you're trying to soothe something deeper, something quieter, something emotional. That moment before you give in. When the urge builds, what you're often looking for is relief. Not from pressure in your body, but from pressure in your mind. Stress, boredom, loneliness, anxiety, sadness, frustration, it all gets bottled up. And when your brain doesn't know how to process those feelings in a healthy way, it reaches for the fastest, easiest source of relief it knows. Something predictable, something you can control, something that promises pleasure without the risk of vulnerability. That's why it becomes a habit, because it works, at least for a moment. It gives you that temporary sense of release. You forget about your problems, your responsibilities, your emotions. You quiet your mind by overstimulating your body. But here's the catch. You never actually fix the thing underneath. You just silence it. And when the silence wears off, it comes back stronger, so you chase the escape again. This is the real cycle most people don't see. Not just dopamine addiction, but emotional avoidance. You're not just addicted to the release. You're relying on it to run away from the things you haven't learned how to face. Let's be real. Life is hard. For most people, masturbation becomes the one space where they feel safe in control and comforted. No expectations, no judgment, no chance of rejection. It's a guarantee of pleasure in a world where very little feels certain. But if you're using it as a way to numb, to forget, to quiet the voice in your head that says you're not enough, you're behind, you're lonely, then you're not satisfying your desire, you're avoiding your pain, and the more you avoid, the more powerful that pain becomes. That's why the emptiness keeps growing. Not because you did something wrong, but because what you truly needed was never actually addressed. Think about this. How often do you feel the urge, not when you're turned on, but when you're overwhelmed, or tired, or disappointed in yourself? You open that tab, or scroll through content, or start imagining, not out of excitement, but out of discomfort, out of a need to regulate something inside you that feels too heavy to sit with. And once you make that connection, once you realize the urge is just a signal that your emotional needs are being ignored, you start to see the whole habit differently. It's not about fighting your biology, it's about asking better questions. What am I really feeling right now? What emotion am I trying to run from? What discomfort am I trying to silence? And then the biggest question of all, what do I actually need instead? Maybe it's connection, maybe it's rest, maybe it's movement, maybe it's just permission to feel what you're feeling without trying to fix it. But until you figure out the real need hiding underneath the habit, no amount of release will ever satisfy you. It's like drinking salt water when you're thirsty. It looks like the solution. It feels like the solution. But the more you drink, the thirstier you become. That's why the emptiness grows. Because what you really wanted wasn't release. It was relief. Not stimulation, but support. Not pleasure, but peace. And no video, no fantasy, no chemical reaction in your brain can give you that. Not in a lasting way. And here's where it gets even deeper. Every time you reach for that release, instead of facing what's actually going on inside you, you send your brain a message. This is how we cope. This is how we deal with discomfort. And over time, that message becomes a script, a loop, a belief system. Your brain stops looking for healthier strategies because it assumes this is the only one that works, and the longer that pattern continues, the harder it becomes to feel real things deeply. You stop crying, you stop feeling joy, you stop getting excited, you stop connecting. Why? Because your emotional system has been hijacked by a shortcut that never delivers the real thing. But here's the truth that can change everything. If your mind knows how to use this habit as a way to self-soothe, then your mind also knows how to break the pattern. Not by shaming yourself, not by forcing abstinence, but by learning what you actually need in those moments of tension, and choosing slowly, consistently, with compassion, to give yourself something better. That might look like taking a walk instead of reaching for your phone, or calling someone you trust, or journaling what you're feeling without judging it. It might mean sitting with the discomfort for 5 minutes, just to prove to yourself that you can, or breathing deeply, or doing something creative. Anything that reminds your brain, hey, I can feel this and survive. I don't need to run every time it gets hard. Because when you stop running and start listening, you'll find that the need underneath the urge is almost always something human, something simple, and something you can actually meet. You're not broken for craving release. You're human for craving comfort. But comfort doesn't have to come at the cost of your clarity, your energy, or your emotional depth. It can come from inside you, from new patterns, from better tools, from a life that's built on real peace, not just temporary silence. So next time the urge hits, pause, just for a moment, and ask yourself, what am I really looking for right now? Because once you start answering that question honestly, that hollow feeling afterward won't own you anymore. You'll finally start replacing escape with healing. And what happens when you do? That's what we'll explore next. Because understanding the habit is only the beginning. Rewiring your brain, reclaiming your energy and emotional clarity. That's where real freedom begins. Let's go there. What if the reason you feel so drained after masturbating isn't psychological or emotional at all, but chemical? What if it all comes down to one powerful molecule in your brain, It's called dopamine. You've heard of it. People call it the pleasure chemical, but that's not really what it is. Dopamine isn't about pleasure. It's about anticipation, want, drive, motivation. It's the feeling of wanting something so badly that it becomes all you can think about. And when you finally get it, that flood you feel, the high, the release, that's dopamine's peak crashing into its crash. And here's where the real problem starts. Your brain is wired to seek out experiences that give you little bursts of dopamine. That's how it keeps you alive. Food, social connection, achievement. Those all trigger healthy, balanced doses. But when you give your brain too much dopamine at once, like through constant scrolling, video binges, or intense solo pleasure, it doesn't know how to handle the overload, so it protects itself. It starts dulling the response. You still do the thing, but you don't feel as good. So what do? You try to push harder, longer, more often. But the pleasure fades, the emptiness creeps in faster, and the baseline for your happiness, it drops. This is dopamine hijacking. When your brain gets flooded too often, it doesn't reset, it recalibrates. It starts producing less dopamine naturally. It reduces the number of dopamine receptors in your reward centers. And over time, the things that used to feel exciting, like hanging out with friends, working toward goals, or enjoying life's simple pleasures, don't give you the same spark, because your brain's motivation system has been numbed out by overstimulation. This is why, after masturbating, especially in a pattern where it's done frequently or with a lot of visual stimuli, you might feel emotionally flat, unmotivated, or even anxious. You didn't just lose energy, you triggered a chemical roller coaster that left your brain confused and depleted. The act didn't release tension like people say. It burned through your brain's reward fuel in one explosive moment, and then left you empty at the bottom of a neurological crash. Here's what most people miss. Dopamine isn't the problem. You need dopamine. It's how you pursue goals, form habits, feel joy. The problem is how it's being manipulated. Masturbation in itself isn't unnatural, but pairing it with hyper-stimulating content, done frequently, in a context of emotional avoidance, that's what rewires the brain into dysfunction. And the consequences don't stop at emptiness. Dopamine burnout affects your drive, your focus, your discipline, your ability to enjoy the world around you. It even affects relationships, because once your brain gets used to the artificial intensity of solo release, especially with visual content that's designed to hit your dopamine center like a slot machine, real intimacy starts to feel dull, slow, frustrating, unpredictable. Why engage with the emotional vulnerability of a real person when you can get the same chemical hit in seconds on demand? That's how isolation builds. That's how shame sets in. Not because you're doing something bad, but because your brain is being tricked into chasing stimulation instead of meaning. And the longer you chase it, the harder it becomes to connect with anything that doesn't give you that same hit. Work feels boring. People feel distant. Your goals start to feel impossible. Not because they are, but because your brain can't hold focus long enough to pursue them without a hit of dopamine to keep it going. And that's the real cost. Not just the sadness afterward. Not just the guilt, but the slow erosion of your inner fire. The ambition, the clarity, the ability to sit with a hard moment and still choose to move forward. That strength is built on a healthy dopamine system, and that system is being hijacked every time you overload it with artificial highs. But here's the good news. Your brain can heal. Dopamine systems are resilient. You can retrain them, not by going cold turkey out of guilt, but by making intentional choices that help reset your reward baseline. Small things, meaningful effort. Dopamine isn't just spiked by pleasure. It's produced through progress, through challenge, through delayed gratification. When you stop flooding your brain and start giving it earned rewards, like finishing a workout, having a deep conversation, completing a task, it begins to rewire itself back to balance. This is why people who take a break from high-stimulation habits, like compulsive solo release, gaming, or even social media, often report feeling more motivated, more alive, more present, not because they removed pleasure, but because they gave their brain space to relearn what real reward feels like. And when that happens, you don't just feel better, you get your energy back, your focus, your clarity, the ability to feel good without needing something intense to make it happen. So the next time you feel that hollow crash after release, don't just blame yourself. Don't spiral into guilt. Just ask, what did I give my brain? And what did it cost me? Because your motivation, your discipline, your happiness, It's all linked to how your brain processes dopamine. And if that system is being hijacked by habits that no longer serve you, the solution isn't shame, it's strategy. And in the next section, that's exactly what we'll explore. How to rebuild your brain's reward system step by step, not by punishing yourself, but by reclaiming the spark that overstimulation tried to steal. Stick with me, because once you understand how to reset your dopamine, you'll stop living in the crash and start living in control. Most people think masturbation is just a physical act, a moment of release, a simple personal thing that doesn't go deeper than the skin. But that assumption ignores something huge, because for a lot of people, especially those who struggle with feeling empty afterward, it's not about the body at all. It's about emotion. It's about what we're running from, what we're trying to soothe, what we don't want to feel. You see, most habits don't form in a vacuum. They form around patterns of escape, moments when life gets too loud, too uncertain, too uncomfortable, stress, loneliness, rejection, boredom, shame. Those feelings build quietly in the background, and your brain doesn't like discomfort. It looks for something predictable to make it stop, something easy, something immediate, something that gives you control. And that's where the habit steps in. Masturbation becomes the shortcut, not just to pleasure, but to avoidance, to relief, not from tension in the body, but tension in the heart. And over time, without even realizing it, your brain starts linking those emotions, stress, sadness, boredom, with the solution of release. Feel bad? Distract yourself. Feel alone? Escape for a few minutes. Feel stuck in your goals, your purpose, your relationships? Just check out. Get that dopamine hit. Numb the discomfort. Reset. But here's the catch. The emotion never really goes away. You just hit pause on it. The pressure builds, you escape into the habit, and afterward, you're still sitting in the same feelings, but now with added guilt, emotional fatigue, and a little less self-trust than you had before. That's why it feels empty afterward. Because the deeper need, the one that triggered the urge in the first place, was never addressed. It was just pushed aside. And this isn't just theory. Psychologists have long known that many compulsive habits are rooted in emotional regulation. Not desire, avoidance. When someone grows up not knowing how to sit with uncomfortable emotions, or worse, being taught that emotions are weakness, they learn to self-soothe in the fastest way available. For some, that's food. For others, scrolling. For many, it's masturbation. Because it works, until it doesn't. Because over time, the brain learns that you can't handle discomfort without it, that you're dependent on the cycle. And then even minor stress can trigger the urge. A long day, an argument, a wave of loneliness. Suddenly, your nervous system is wired to respond with escape instead of processing. And that's when the habit becomes more than just routine. It becomes a cage. This is especially true for men, who are often taught to suppress emotion altogether. Don't cry. Don't show weakness. Don't talk about your feelings. So where does all that energy go? It gets buried, repressed. And when it becomes too heavy to carry, it comes out sideways, through distraction, through compulsive behaviors, through temporary hits of pleasure that don't require vulnerability. But the emptiness afterward, that's the cost. That quiet voice inside saying, this isn't really helping. That feeling of being disconnected, not just from others, but from yourself. And no amount of content, intensity, or repetition will ever satisfy that deeper hunger. Because the craving isn't physical, it's emotional. What you're really searching for is peace, connection, relief that lasts. And once you see that, the way forward becomes clearer. Not easier, but clearer. Because now you can ask the real question. What am I actually feeling before the urge shows up? Not what I'm escaping into, but what I'm escaping from. Is it loneliness? Is it stress I haven't acknowledged? Is it that ache of not feeling seen or not believing I'm enough? Or feeling stuck in life with nowhere safe to put those emotions? If you can pause, even for a moment, before the habit, and just get curious, you're already rewiring your brain. You're creating a space between emotion and impulse, between discomfort and distraction. And in that space, you get your power back. That doesn't mean you never do it again. It doesn't mean the goal is to suppress all urges or live some perfect life. It means you stop using the habit as a mask. You stop lying to yourself about why you're really reaching for it. You get honest. And when you do, you open the door to real healing. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're finally listening to what your emotions have been trying to say all along. So what do you do instead? You start building new ways to respond to emotional discomfort, ways that don't leave you emptier afterward. That might mean journaling when you feel overwhelmed, going for a walk, texting someone you trust, breathing through the anxiety instead of burying it, even just noticing the urge and sitting with it for 60 seconds before making a choice. Every time you do that, you strengthen a new neural pathway, one that says, I can face this, I don't need to run. That's how you break the emotional link, not with willpower alone, but with awareness, with compassion, with tools that help you reconnect to your real needs. Because the truth is, the emptiness you feel isn't a failure, it's a signal. Your emotions aren't trying to hurt you, they're trying to guide you. And once you stop numbing them, they can lead you back to clarity, confidence, and real self-control. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into exactly how to reset this pattern from the inside out, how to create new routines that support your mental health, emotional strength, and physical energy, without falling into the same crash-and-repeat cycle. Stay with me, because this is where the real transformation begins. Once you start to see the habit for what it really is, a response to emotion, not just desire, you've already taken the first step, but awareness alone isn't enough. Knowing why you feel empty after masturbation is important, but if you want real change, if you want to stop the crash, the guilt, the fatigue, the loop, you need to rewire the pattern itself. And that doesn't happen overnight. It happens through small, deliberate changes that shift the way your brain responds to stress, boredom, loneliness, and the need for comfort. Let's start with the most overlooked part of all, your environment. You might not realize it, but the space around you, the habits you've built into your daily routine, are silently triggering the behavior before you even feel the urge. The room you always retreat to, the time of day when you're usually alone, the apps on your phone, the websites saved in your browser, even the lighting in your room, it's all part of a ritual, and rituals are powerful. They train your brain to anticipate dopamine before you've even made a conscious choice. So your first move is this. Disrupt the ritual. Change the routine. If your urge usually hits late at night in your room, change the flow. Go for a walk before bed. Read with the light on instead of scrolling in the dark. If you always use your phone as a gateway, move it to the other side of the room when you're alone. Replace the instant access with even the tiniest barrier. Because once you interrupt the pattern, you give your brain a moment to wake up, and that moment is everything. Next, build a new default. Because you can't just remove the habit and leave a vacuum behind. The brain doesn't like silence. It needs something to reach for. So ask yourself, what's one small action I can take in the moment the urge hits? Not something dramatic or unrealistic. Something doable. Maybe it's stepping outside for 2 minutes. Maybe it's doing 10 push-ups. Maybe it's putting on music, standing up and changing your posture. Anything that interrupts the mental spiral. Why does this matter? Because urges aren't permanent. They come in waves. And research shows that most last no more than 15-20 minutes if you don't feed them. So your job isn't to fight the urge, it's to surf the wave. Distract your nervous system long enough to break the association. And the more you do this, the more your brain starts to realize, I have other options. I'm not trapped. I don't need the old escape anymore. Now, let's talk about dopamine, because this is where the fatigue and emptiness really come from. Masturbation, especially when paired with porn or compulsive routines, floods your system with dopamine, and then drops it, hard. That crash afterward, that's your brain resetting to baseline, often below it. And if your daily life isn't filled with other sources of meaningful dopamine, like progress, connection, movement, you start relying on the artificial spike more and more. So here's how you reset. Start feeding your brain with natural dopamine sources. Exercise. Cold exposure, deep breathing, small wins. Cleaning your room, learning a skill, real human interaction. All of these things raise dopamine in a slower, more sustainable way. And when your baseline goes up, your dependence on artificial spikes goes down. You feel more grounded, more focused, more alive. But it's not just about replacing dopamine. It's about regulating your nervous system. Because behind every habit is a nervous system trying to feel safe. And if you've been using masturbation to soothe anxiety, numb pain, or check out emotionally, your body has forgotten how to calm down on its own. That's why tools like breathwork, meditation, grounding exercises, even just sitting with discomfort without reacting, they matter more than you think. They teach your body, I can feel this and survive, and that is real power. It's also why your relationship with self-trust needs to be rebuilt. Because every time you promise yourself this is the last time, and then fall back into the loop, a small part of you stops believing in your own word. And that self-betrayal creates even more stress, guilt, and emotional fatigue. So instead of setting unrealistic goals like "I'll never do it again," start with micro-commitments you can actually keep. Tonight I'll wait 10 minutes before reacting. Today I'll do one thing to interrupt the cycle. Stack small wins. That's how you rebuild trust, not with perfection but with consistency. And let's not ignore what most people avoid: connection. Real human connection is the most powerful antidote to emptiness. The more isolated you feel, the more you'll fall back on the habit. But when you start talking to people again, opening up, being honest, building community, even if it's awkward or messy at first, you remind yourself that you don't have to carry everything alone, that you don't need to escape into a screen to feel something. Now, none of this is instant. You'll slip. You'll have days where the urge wins. You'll get frustrated. But every moment you choose to slow down instead of react, every time you breathe through discomfort instead of numbing it, you're reshaping your brain, you're creating new pathways, you're proving to yourself that the emptiness isn't permanent, it's a signal. And when you answer it with awareness instead of avoidance, you start to fill the space with something real. So ask yourself, what if the next time the urge hits, you didn't shame yourself for it, but used it as a cue to pause, reflect, and choose differently? What if you treated it not as a weakness, but as a message from your nervous system saying, "I need care, not escape"? That shift alone could change everything. Because breaking the cycle isn't about willpower. It's about awareness, intention, and slowly building a life that feels rich enough that you don't need to keep escaping it. A life where you feel alive after the moment, not empty. And in the next section, we'll dive into what that life actually looks like, how to rebuild energy, purpose, and real connection, so that even if the habit returns, it no longer controls you. Stick around, you're closer than you think. Let's be honest, when you've spent years using a private habit like masturbation to cope, to numb out, or to feel something, stopping it doesn't magically make your life better. At first, it can actually make things feel worse. You're left with silence, restlessness, emotions that used to be buried start bubbling up. The quick relief you once had is gone, and now you're face to face with everything you used to avoid. And this is where most people give up, not because they're weak, but because they never learned how to rebuild, how to fill the emptiness with something real, something energizing, something that connects you back to yourself and your life. That's what this section is about. Not just quitting the habit, but rebuilding your energy from the ground up, giving your brain and body what they were always searching for, but in a way that leaves you stronger, not drained. First, let's talk about energy. When you're stuck in a cycle of daily or compulsive release, your nervous system becomes overstimulated and under-recovered. Dopamine gets hijacked, motivation drops, focus slips. Your baseline energy isn't steady, it's chaotic. Up and down, high and low, wired and then empty. That crash you feel after is your body telling you it's exhausted, not just from the act itself, but from the emotional load you've been carrying without release of the right kind. To rebuild, you need structure. Your body craves rhythm. So the first step is to create a routine that grounds you, one that gives you consistent physical and mental fuel throughout the day. And no, this isn't about waking up at 5 a.m. and doing ice baths unless you want to. It's about giving your nervous system what it actually needs: movement, sunlight, hydration, real food, and small achievable goals. That's it. Start small. Get sunlight in the morning. Go for a walk, even just 10 minutes. Stretch, drink water before your coffee. Do one thing early in the day that builds momentum. Why? Because momentum is your greatest weapon against relapse. When you feel like you're progressing even in small ways, you no longer crave the false reward. You start to feel the real thing: pride, strength, control. But energy alone isn't enough. You need connection. The reason the habit leaves you feeling empty is because it's pleasure without connection, release without meaning, stimulation without touch. The human nervous system was never designed to experience that kind of isolation with that level of intensity. So when it's over, there's a drop, a void, and what's worse, you feel like you can't talk to anyone about it. That's why rebuilding connection is just as important as managing urges. And I'm not just talking about romantic or sexual connection. I mean real connection, friendship, community, eye contact, laughter, being seen, and seeing others. Every time you open yourself up to someone else, your brain gets a hit of oxytocin, the bonding chemical. That's the stuff you're truly craving, whether you realize it or not. If you've been isolating, start small. Text a friend, join a group online or in person, volunteer, say yes to a plan, even if you don't feel like it. It'll feel awkward at first, maybe even forced. But the more you expose yourself to connection, the more alive you feel. You remember, oh, this is what I've been missing, not just pleasure, presence. And here's something few people talk about. Your creative energy comes back. When you stop wasting dopamine on instant gratification, your brain starts craving purpose. You'll feel it as a restlessness at first, a weird pressure in your chest, like you want to do something but you're not sure what. That's not anxiety. That's creative energy waking back up. It's time to channel it. Write, build, cook, learn a new skill, start a side project. It doesn't have to be world-changing. It just has to make you feel alive. The emptiness you used to run from. You fill it by creating, by moving, by expressing yourself in ways that require time, attention, and soul, not just stimulus. And here's the key. Don't do it alone. Find a friend or a community who's also trying to change. Whether it's NoFap, a fitness challenge, or just someone you can text when the urge hits, connection is your anchor. Willpower fades, but relationships pull you through. Now let's talk relapse, because it will happen. And when it does, your brain will try to tell you it's over, that you failed, that you're back at zero. That's a lie. Every slip is a message, not about your worth, but about what needs attention. Were you bored, anxious, lonely, tired? The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Learn from it, adjust your environment, and move forward. Every time you bounce back, you build resilience. And most importantly, bring compassion. This isn't about shame, it's about healing. You're not broken, you're just wired, like every other human being trying to feel good in a world that constantly overloads your brain. You didn't choose the trap, but you can choose your way out. So if you're here trying to change, trying to understand why you feel the way you do and how to feel better, you're already ahead of most people. You've chosen awareness over avoidance, effort over escape, and that right there is the beginning of transformation. Because the truth is, the emptiness after masturbation isn't the problem, it's the symptom, the signal. And when you finally listen, really listen, your life begins to change. Not because you quit a habit, but because you finally started showing up for yourself. And in the final section, we're going to bring everything together, the science, the story, the steps, and show you exactly how to build a long-term strategy that keeps you aligned, energized, and fully in control. Stay with me. You're almost there. By now you've seen the pattern, the spike of dopamine, the crash afterward, the emotional emptiness, and the cycle that keeps pulling you back in. But understanding it isn't enough. If you want to break free, you need a long-term strategy, one that goes beyond just resisting the urge and gets to the root of what you actually need. Because this isn't just about quitting a habit, it's about rewiring the reward system in your brain and reclaiming your energy, focus, and self-respect. And yes, that's absolutely possible, but only if you have a plan. Step 1. Identify the real trigger. Most people think the trigger is the urge itself, but the urge is just the messenger. The real trigger is the emotion behind it: boredom, loneliness, anxiety, exhaustion, stress. The moment you feel the urge, stop and ask yourself, what's happening in my body right now? Are you tired, frustrated, feeling unmotivated? Write it down, track it. The more clearly you can see your patterns, the easier it becomes to interrupt them. Next, change your cue environment. Your brain craves what it's used to. If you always indulge in the habit at night, alone, on your phone, then guess what? Every night, your brain starts prepping for that reward before you've even made a conscious decision. That's why willpower alone doesn't work. You need to change the cue. Move your phone away from your bed. Leave the room where you usually act out. Turn on a podcast. Stand up. Breathe deeply for 30 seconds. The goal here isn't to suppress the urge, it's to interrupt the automatic pathway before it becomes action. Third, replace the reward. This is the part everyone skips. If you just try to not do it, but you don't replace that spike of dopamine with something else, you're leaving your brain in a deficit, and eventually, it will pull you back to what it knows. So you need a substitute, something that feels good but doesn't leave you drained. Cold shower, maybe. Intense music, better. A quick workout, excellent. But even something as simple as texting a friend, stepping outside, or journaling can reset your focus. Give your brain a reward that builds you up, not one that burns you out. Now let's talk about momentum. Dopamine thrives on progress. That's why setting daily challenges, even tiny ones, is so powerful. Make your bed, do 10 push-ups, learn one new thing. You're training your brain to associate dopamine with effort, not escape, and over time, that rewires the loop. You stop chasing fake satisfaction and start craving real growth. But don't do this alone. If you're serious about changing, you need accountability, not punishment, not judgment. Just someone who knows your goals and can remind you of who you're trying to become when your willpower fades. That might be a friend, a coach, a community. Even anonymous forums can help. But whatever you choose, don't isolate. Connection is the antidote to compulsion. And here's the big one. Reset your baseline. If you've been flooding your brain with high-stimulation content for years, your dopamine system is fried. Everything else, conversation, learning, real intimacy, feels boring by comparison. So yes, the early days of quitting will feel flat, numb, quiet. That's not failure, that's healing. Your brain is recalibrating. Ride it out. Over time, that baseline resets. You start to feel joy again, in normal healthy things, sunlight, laughter, music, a long conversation, but only if you give your mind a chance to recover. Finally, be patient. Real change isn't measured in streaks. It's measured in how you respond when you fall. Because yes, you will fall. You'll have moments where you cave, where you relapse, where you think, I'll never change. And that's okay. Every slip is data, not shame. Use it. Ask why it happened. Learn from it. Adjust. Move forward. And remind yourself every single day you choose growth over comfort. You're not starting over. You're starting stronger. You are not your urges. You are not your past. You are not defined by a habit you built during a hard time. You are something more, something stronger, deeper, more aware. And this whole process, it isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the noise, before the numbness, before the cycle. So build your system, know your triggers, change your cues, replace the reward, find your people, reset your brain, and most of all, trust that the emptiness you've been feeling isn't permanent. It's just the space being cleared for something real, something powerful, something you get to create. And now that you know the truth, the real question is, what are you going to do with it? So now you know. That empty, heavy feeling that creeps in after you finish. It's not random. It's not weakness. It's not something broken inside you. It's your brain reacting to a chemical imbalance it didn't ask for. It's your body responding to a habit it never fully understood. And most of all, it's a signal, one you've probably been ignoring for a long time. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. That emptiness, it's not your enemy. It's a message. It's your system trying to tell you, this isn't working. I'm not okay with this. And the truth is, you don't need to hate yourself to change. You don't need shame or guilt or punishment. You just need awareness and a reason. Because here's something you haven't heard enough. That feeling you get afterward isn't a flaw. It's a clue. It's the proof that you were never meant to trade connection for a screen. That you were never designed to extract short bursts of pleasure from something that leaves you emptier every time. And maybe that's hard to admit. Maybe you've been using this habit to cope for months or even years, to feel something. To feel less, to feel in control. But ask yourself, is it still serving you? Or has it slowly taken more than it ever gave? You see, emptiness doesn't show up when your life is full. It shows up when something's missing. And most of the time, what's missing isn't sex, it's intimacy, it's purpose, it's direction. It's the little wins that make you proud of who you're becoming. And when those things are absent, your brain grabs for the fastest fix it can find. That's not evil, that's survival. But surviving isn't the same as living. And if you're still watching this, you already know that. You've felt the slow leak of motivation, the way your goals drift further away, the way your attention dulls, your emotions flatten, and your self-trust crumbles. You've felt how one decision at night affects how you feel in the morning, how it numbs your excitement, shrinks your confidence, leaves you more tired than before, and you've wondered, maybe silently, what your life would look like without it. Who you'd be without the constant cycle of I won't do it again, followed by just this one time. But here's what they don't tell you. Breaking this habit isn't about quitting cold turkey or achieving some perfect streak. It's about rebuilding a life where that urge no longer makes sense, where your mind is too focused, your purpose too strong, your energy too high to even need that escape. That's when the change becomes permanent, not when you remove the behavior, but when you replace it with something better. And you don't have to do it all at once. Start by being honest, not dramatic, not panicked, just honest. Ask yourself, what is this habit protecting me from? What am I really craving when I reach for it? Is it connection, validation, peace? Once you know the answer, you can begin building the life that gives you those things for real, not just in 5-second bursts, but in ways that last. And here's the most hopeful part. Your brain is not broken. It's plastic. It adapts. It heals. That sense of flatness, the numbness, the low energy, that's not permanent. It's temporary. And the more you choose real over fake, discomfort over escape, intention over impulse, the more your system recalibrates, until one day you realize you don't feel empty anymore. You feel clear. You feel powerful. You feel alive. This journey isn't linear. You'll slip. You'll fall back into old patterns. And that's okay, because every time you come back to awareness, you come back stronger, more grounded, more conscious. This isn't about perfection. It's about becoming someone you can respect when you look in the mirror. So next time the urge shows up, pause, take a breath, remember what it really is, a shortcut your brain learned when it didn't know better. But you do now. You've seen the truth, and that means you get to choose differently, not just once, but over and over, every day, in small ways that build a bigger future. Because this isn't just about stopping something, it's about starting something bigger, reclaiming your drive, your attention, your joy, and yes, your intimacy too. The kind that doesn't leave you empty, but fills you up, fully, honestly, lastingly. So if this message landed for you, don't keep it to yourself, share it, talk about it, leave a comment. Tell us one thing you're going to do differently starting today, because the more we talk about it, the less shame wins, and the more people realize they're not alone. Thank you for being here, thank you for watching, and thank you most of all for choosing to take your life back, one decision at a time. You've got this, and we'll be here with you, every step of the way.